It is now time for the Robesonian Sports Report with Chris Stiles on 97.1 FM, 1340 AM, WAGR in Lumberton, covering sports for Robeson County. Now here's your host, Chris Stiles.
And welcome to the Robesonian Sports Report here on WAGR. I'm your host, Chris Stiles, sports editor at the Robesonian. And as we start off the show, we'll do what we do each week and talk about the previous week's high school football action locally as well as UNCP. And it was a rather interesting week 11 of high school football locally, the last week of the regular season. Lumberton earning a 15-12 win over Purnell Sweat. St. Paul's beat Midway convincingly 62-22. Red Springs beat West Bladen 32-18. Clinton beat Fairmont 60-8. Collegiately, UNCP beat Glenville State 49-0. And jumping right in on certainly the biggest story from those results, Lumberton's upset of Purnell Sweat 15-12. It was Lumberton's first win over the Rams since 2018, and a series that always produces close and hard-fought games, and this was yet another. And as it played out on Friday night, it looked like Purnell Sweat may be knocked out of the playoffs from this result. They, in fact, were projected by High School OT as the first team out as of Saturday morning. And this is not like NCAA tournament projections, let's say, where it's one man's opinion on what the committee might do. We know the criteria for the NCHSAA, so the predictions are a little bit more solid usually, but something had kind of fell through the cracks on that projection. And so when the actual preliminary bracket came out, Purnell Sweat was the last team in the field in 4A, but we'll talk about the playoffs here in a little bit. But so the Rams did end up getting in even despite the loss to Lumberton. Lumberton with a couple of second-half touchdowns from Jacoby Pevia, who rushed for 167 yards on the night. The first was after a long drive after a Lumberton fumble recovery, in which Pevia had a 3rd and 25 run to get it to a 4th and 1, which they converted on a run by Isaiah Whittington. And a few plays later, Pevia scored on a 4-yard run. They gave Lumberton an 8-6 lead. Purnell Sweat turned it over on downs early in the fourth quarter after driving as far as the Lumberton 11-yard line. And then 2 plays later, Jacoby Pevia ran 77 yards for a touchdown to give Lumberton a 15-6 lead. Purnell Sweat did answer, went 69 yards in 6 plays to score on a Raymond Cummings to Jedediah Wilkins touchdown pass, made it 15-12. But then Purnell Sweat's next possession, the Lumberton defense got a stop on a 4th down, and then the Pirates were able to run out the clock and seal the win. Lumberton's rushing total by half was 7 in the first half and 190 in the second half. So definitely a big shift for the Pirates running the ball and how effective they were able to be running the ball with Pevia and others as they were able to score a couple times there in the second half and upend this game. And it's a big way for Lumberton to end Dennis McFatten's first season as the head coach. They had a 19-game losing streak until just a couple of weeks ago, beat Douglas Byrd, lost to 71st, as everyone has for 3 years in regular season play, and then turn around and beat Purnell Sweat. So 1-2 of their last 3 to end the season in McFatten's debut. So certainly some things to build on for Lumberton from this finish. And we're going to have Dennis McFatten on the show here shortly, and we'll talk more about that with him. Elsewhere, St. Paul's earned a 62-22 win over Midway. Bulldogs finished second in the conference, in the Southeastern Conference, with this win, and a convincing one at that, winning by 40. Bulldogs' offense pretty relentless in this game, and I'll add they've scored now 62, 51, and 62 in the last 3 years against Midway. So the Bulldogs' offense certainly seems to have the Midway defense figured out. There were several big yardage plays to score touchdowns in this game. A punt return touchdown for Malcott Locklear. Tyler Parks ran for a couple of scores as well. And then a strong defensive game holding a dynamic Midway offense to 22 points in this one. St. Paul's has won 6 of its last 7 entering the playoffs. Did have the loss to Clinton. So they're a potentially dangerous out as a 21 seed in the playoffs, as a team that is coming in playing pretty well. And then Red Springs beat West Bladen 32-18. Red Springs needed it to get in the playoffs. They came into the week projected as the last team in. West Bladen projected as the first team out. And Red Springs did what it needed to do, took care of business here, and did, in fact, get a playoff bid on Saturday. It was a pretty dominant performance, in fact. It was their best offensive game of the season. A couple touchdown runs from Jakelson Mack. Receiving touchdowns for T.J. Ellerby and Justice McMillan, both of those on passes from Scotty Locklear. And even the playoff side of it notwithstanding, Red Springs finishes the regular season at 5-5. This is a 4-win improvement from last year, which was Tim Ray's first year. He builds to the 4-win improvement in the second season that he's at the helm at his alma mater. And in fact, they won one game 2 years ago as well. So in Lawrence Chez's final year. So certainly some improvement for the Red Devils and some positive things to build on there, regardless of what happens in the state playoffs this week. Here on the Robesonian Sports Report on WAGR, I'm your host, Chris Stiles, going over high school football from this past week in Robeson County. And the other high school game we haven't touched on yet, Clinton beat Fairmont 60-8. Jeremy Carthen said it best on Clinton. He said, quote, "They were who they said they were. They were very good." They dominated this game from start to finish. Fairmont did score a touchdown on actually a fake punt. Adrian O'Neill threw a pass to Trevelius Leach on that play. I believe at the time that made it 19-8. They also got the 2-point conversion. It was 25-8 after one quarter. It was 52-8 at halftime. Pretty cut and dry what happened in this one. Clinton very dominant as they've been all year against everyone. And Clinton earned a number 1 seed in the 2A East region in the playoffs. They'll face Kinston in the first round. Fairmont finishes on exactly 2 wins for the third straight year, although this was Jeremy Carthen's first year leading the Golden Tornadoes program. At the college level locally, UNCP earned a 49-0 win over Glenville State. Third straight dominant performance for the Braves. We talked coming into this stretch after the first of those 3 about how now they were coming into an easier part of the schedule, and that is true, but this goes beyond that. They're legitimately playing their best football, playing better than they were earlier in the season. And this is the first time in program history they've had back-to-back shutout wins. Also a 154-7 margin over the span of the last 3 games, which is a program record, besting a 121-16 3-game stretch in 2008. This game was 21-0 at halftime, and the Braves kind of just kept their foot on the gas, accelerating into the second half. Similar game art to the previous one at West Virginia Wesleyan. Colin Johnson was 15 for 24 throwing the ball for 336 yards, 4 touchdowns, ran for 41 as well. Jaquan Kelly had a great game running the ball, 141 yards and 2 touchdowns. And Malik Tobias was a big target for Johnson, 6 catches, 146 yards, and 3 touchdowns. The Braves have a bye this week. This was supposed to be the Alderson-Broadus spot on the schedule, but that game fell off the schedule when that program closed. So Braves have a bye this week, going into their finale next week at home against Concord, looking to finish at 7-3 here in Mark Hall's first season leading the Braves. And then a non-football story locally certainly is UNCP facing Duke men's basketball last night at Cameron Indoor Stadium. I was privileged to be courtside covering this. A preseason exhibition game. Obviously, the score was kind of what you would expect. It was 109-64. An experience builder, though, for the Braves. The once-in-a-lifetime chance, frankly, to play at Cameron Indoor Stadium and the chance to play that level of competition. Duke, number 2 in the country in Division I in the AP poll. UNCP actually is number 8 in the coaches poll that just came out yesterday for Division II. So technically a top 10 matchup if you want to look at it that way, albeit coming from different levels. And one other note, real quick on that coaches poll, the Braves do play their first 6 games are against the top 30 in the coaches poll in Division II. So they're definitely going to test themselves here early, as they have already done so against Duke, and they played Houston, coached by Kelvin Sampson, Pembroke native and UNCP alum, on Saturday. That was an 86-47 result in Houston's favor. But last night, a bright spot certainly for the Braves was freshman Dallas Gardner, scored 22 points with 8 rebounds. Somebody they're really looking to make an impact this year. Very impressive performance for him in that kind of bright lights environment for somebody that was playing high school basketball just a few months ago. Nigel Verdier had 9 points. Jamarvius Jones had 8 points for the Braves. 7 Blue Devils did score 9 points or more, including Kyle Filipowski had 17 points, 6 rebounds, 3 assists. Jared McCain and Tyrese Proctor scored 15 each for Duke. And some stats were lopsided, as you would expect, but others were very respectable and frankly something the Braves can be proud of. As an example, the bench points was even, 38 all. Points in the paint only favored Duke by 2, 34-32. And then rebounding, Duke had 36 rebounds and UNCP had 31 for going into the game with such a size disadvantage. Playing Duke, there's probably not, you can probably count on one hand the number of D2 schools that could hang with Duke in a rebounding sense. So for a program that prides itself so much on rebounding as UNCP does, that's certainly a impressive result in the rebounding column to be right there almost even with the Blue Devils in that one. And as I mentioned, the Braves open the season. They play Emporia State in a tournament event down in Florida coming up in a few days. So, and you can read about all this on the Robesonian, the high school football and college football from last week, as well as UNCP at Duke. And coming up after the break, we'll have Dennis McFatten to talk about Lumberton's big win over Purnell Sweat. This is the Robesonian Sports Report on WAGR. Back on the Robesonian Sports Report, and we're joined over the phone by Lumberton head coach Dennis McFatten, fresh off the Pirates' upset win over Purnell Sweat last week. How's it going, Coach?
Going great. How about yourself?
Doing pretty good. So, your first season as a head coach coming to an end with that result on Friday. Lots of ups and downs for you guys. Could you have imagined a season that's been the roller coaster like this one has?
No, I could not, especially being the first year as a head coach. 10 years of experience and never experienced anything like this first year has been a head coach. It's a bunch of roller coaster rides of up and down throughout the season.
Yep. And getting to end it on a win, and in fact winning 2 out of the last 3 after what had been a 19-game losing streak. So how can that momentum be valuable for you guys moving into the offseason?
Oh, definitely big momentum, just letting people know that, hey, you have to work in order to have these type of moments happen. You know, we came in with a worker's mentality. The players, like I said, my seniors, I love them to death. They knew exactly what it meant to build the ship. Going into the season knowing, you know, getting into a new style of offense, new defense, that this was not going to be a playoff run or conference championship run. It was going to be basically building a foundation for the later years to come of what we want to have going on in Lumberton. So it definitely brings the momentum, definitely brings more kids out of the school building. It definitely keeps our kids here. So it's definitely a big momentum going into this offseason.
Yep. And you were able to run the ball very well in the second half of that game, 7 rushing yards in the first half and 190 in the second half. What changed from the first half to the second half, and how big of a factor was that in the outcome?
Honestly, again, played a good team. They had high emotions. We had high emotions. The offensive line for us, we just had to lock in, honestly. Halftime game, and we let them know that we we're not going to change too much just because of the fact of we knew the game plan, and that's what we're going to stick with. It was kind of went down to who wanted it more. Our players was able to lock in and get it done the second half. Defensively, like I said, I told them it was going to be a defensive battle of who could stop whose offense. And we was able to make some big stops during that game. Rushing wise, obviously, having Jacoby Pevia, that changes the game a lot. He just actually got his first offer yesterday as well. So having him in the backfield, it definitely changes the game. When you're able to feed him here and there, and he gets a couple of yards, but he's always due for one that he's going to break, and luckily that one was 70-plus yards.
Yeah.
They was able to put it in the end zone.
Yeah, and Pevia being the kind of undersized guy that he is, but so physical for you guys, how is that kind of the embodiment of what you want your players to be at Lumberton? And then also tell us a little bit more about that offer he picked up yesterday.
Yes, Pevia, great leader. He was not chosen as a team captain, but I look back on it, and he has been one of the team captains, the unsaid team captain, because he, again, undersized, but yet he may be 5'6", 5'7", but man, he runs like he's 6'2", 220 pounds. Well, that's the type of guy that we want: hardworking, nose to the ground, worker, and that's what attracted St. Andrew to him. And he also has two more colleges of interest, and also his GPA. So he works on and off the field, and he runs track. He clocked, I think, if I'm not mistaken, like a 10.5 in the 100. So he works all around the clock, on the field, off the field. He's that guy that we want at Lumberton High School.
Here on the Robesonian Sports Report on WAGR, I'm your host, Chris Stiles, and we're talking with Lumberton head football coach Dennis McFatten. Coach, playoffs not in the cards for you guys this year. We know kind of what this week looks like for the teams that are still playing. We know what the next 6-9 months looks like for you guys with the off season. But what does this week, next week, this immediate start of the off season look like for you?
Immediately, we're getting into the other sports that are taking part. We want to make sure our athletes on the football team are well-rounded. So they're participating in the wrestling, the basketball. We want to be multi-sport athletes. I greatly support multi-sport athletes to where, hey, the skills you learn in different sports can definitely help and translate on the football field. So as the sports are going right now, we want as many of our athletes to participate. We want our numbers to participate in the school building of who participates in these sports, and then the ones that obviously get cut from the programs, they're going to be doing some training on the track, weightlifting. They're just going to get their bodies ready for next season. But we're going to make sure we're staying active. It's going to be a maintaining phase here soon, just to get the nicks and the bumps and the bruises out. But then we're going to really hit it hard so we can be prepared for next fall.
And we mentioned the recruiting cycle a little bit with Jacoby getting an offer, but you've got one Division I signee in Nakoma Scott going to Davidson. Some other guys are getting some interest. People on the outside of the program look more at on-field results, obviously, and that's obviously a big part of it too. But how big of a deal in the program is the recruiting side of it as you're looking to build?
It's heavy. I probably send about 100 to 200 emails every 2 weeks to different schools and sending out film, keeping the guys' films updated. We have 3 that's going on game visits this weekend, a couple more going on game visits next weekend. So it's constant communication, especially trying to do all that while the season is going as well. But now that the season is done, we have our full attention on it. Myself, the recruiting coordinator of my program, Josh Sheridan, he's heavy in on talking to these coaches and getting some game invites where these guys can be seen on campus so it can be, obviously, we're still in competition with the ones that are playing right now, but being able to have their film be seen, being able to be seen face-to-face with these coaches, and also, again, all this whole year, we did study hall before our practices to make sure our academics are up. So when it comes down to our GPAs, that we are in good standings with these schools.
And what surprised you here about being a head coach in your first season in that role?
What didn't surprise me? It was definitely a new venture. A lot of things popped up to where, like I said, I didn't see throughout my coaching years, and I guess that's a compliment to my previous head coaches that I was under. They were able to provide a program for me that was very smooth and functioning very well, to where I didn't see the things that went behind the scenes that they went through. So being able to be in that lead role and seeing these things and being able to experience it was definitely new. Everything from the outside of the program happening to the program to the inside. The smallest thing about ordering mouthpieces,
Yeah.
So it's been a great experience, a surprising experience. Obviously, we didn't get the record that we want, but we got the momentum that we needed to continue to build forward.
And what will Lumberton football look like 365 days from now?
In the playoffs, I'm gonna speak into existence. Next year, we'll be practicing right now in this cold weather.
Coach Dennis McFatten, thanks for joining us here on the Robesonian Sports Report.
Thank you for having me. Greatly appreciate you.
Yep, and we'll be right back. Back on the Robesonian Sports Report here on WAGR. I'm your host, Chris Stiles, sports editor at the Robesonian, and looking at a preview of the first round of the NCHSAA state playoffs in football, which happened on Friday night. All these are 7 o'clock kickoffs, and all three Robeson County teams that qualified are playing their opponents for the first time in program history, so that's an interesting note. None of them are short trips either, but we'll start with Purnell Sweat and Rolesville. The Rams, the last team in the field in the 4A East region. They're the number 32 seed. Rolesville, the number 1 seed. It's Purnell Sweat's first appearance since 2017 in the state playoffs. They haven't won a playoff game since 2010. This is a battle of the Rams. Rolesville is also the Rams. Rolesville won the Northern 4A Conference Championship. They do have a loss on the resume, which sometimes playing a number 1 seed, it seems insurmountable, playing the number 1, and often they're undefeated, and we see that in other classifications as well in this bracket. But Rolesville does have a loss, and it was, in fact, a 29-point loss to a non-conference opponent, Grimsley, back in August. Grimsley is, as it happens, the number 4 seed in the West region in these playoffs. Rolesville's defense has allowed 19.2 points per game, pretty good number, but they've also allowed 27 or more 4 times this year. One of those was 2 weeks ago to Wake Forest, so a little bit gettable at times as well. But the offense has been really explosive for Rolesville and getting progressively better as well, averaging just under 50 points a game. Braden Atkinson's thrown for over 2,600 yards, 34 touchdowns. Devin Thomas has rushed for nearly 1,700 yards and 25 scores. Jaden Alford, nearly 1,300 receiving yards and 15 touchdown receptions as well. Numbers that just pop off the page, frankly. Defensively, Javon Wright, big for them at the linebacker position with 69 tackles. Cameron Manley has 4 interceptions. And then a couple of star defensive linemen, Russell Sykes, 12 tackles for loss, and Jaden Fry has 9 sacks for them. Certainly a test on both sides of the ball for Purnell Sweat as they return to the playoffs for the first time in 6 years. Elsewhere, St. Paul's is a number 21 seed in the 2A East region, and they're going to number 12 Hertford County for the first round. 8th straight playoff appearance for the Bulldogs. They, of course, reached the state championship game back in the spring 21 season went to the fourth round in the fall of 21, and then last year lost in the first round at Green Central. Two conference runners-up in this game. Hertford was second in the Northeastern Coastal Conference behind Northeastern High School, who was the number 2 seed, or is the number 2 seed in the 2A East region. In fact, when they played each other this was several weeks ago, but what ended up deciding the conference title in that league, it was just a 1-point game. So Hertford County staying right there with some of the best of the best. The Bears entered last week's game coming off of back-to-back shutouts, but played a high-scoring game last week, a 48-44 win over Holmes. And the Bears have won 4 straight games since that 1-point loss to Northeastern. They, too, have a very strong offense, averaging 47.8 per game. Kavion Rogers is their quarterback. Coach Mike Setzer for St. Paul said this may be the best quarterback they've seen all year, and they've seen some pretty good ones, so that's pretty high praise. Rogers has thrown for nearly 1,700 yards and 26 touchdowns. He's also the team's second-leading rusher with 644 rushing yards and 13 scores. Elijah Outlaw's had a good season running the ball. He's going to hit 1,000 yards early on in this game, most likely, with 12 touchdowns this season. And Rogers has had several consistent targets in the passing game. Rogers is also one of their best defensive players. He has 4 interceptions from a defensive back position, alongside Remiez Williams, who also has 4 picks. And then their linebacker, Devontae Cofield, 119 tackles and 19 tackles for loss this season. Both those are very, very strong numbers from the linebacker position. The winner here will face the winner of Wallace Rose Hill and Green Central in the second round. Of course, St. Paul's has got to take it one game at a time, but if they could get past Hertford County, which is a very long trip to just inland from the Outer Banks, Wallace Rose Hill, should they advance, would be a much shorter trip next week. But again, the Bulldogs will have their hands full with the Bears. A winnable game, but one they're going to have to play well to win. I'll add on the Purnell Sweat Rollsville game, the opposite game on the bracket, Wake Forest and Garner, the 16 versus 17 game in 4A. In going back to 2A, Red Springs is a number 30 seed after they essentially got in the field with their win over West Bladen last week. They will head to number 3, Southwest Edgecombe, on Friday night. It's Red Springs' first playoff appearance since the spring 2021 season, and they haven't won a playoff game since 2019. Southwest Edgecombe, the undefeated champs of the Eastern Plains Conference, did have a couple non-conference losses, but these are 2 very strong teams. Tarboro is a number 1 seed in 1A. Nash Central is the number 4 seed in this 2A East region, and those are the 2 games that Southwest Edgecombe has lost. They're averaging 38.4 points per game. The defense actually a little bit gettable at times. This is a run-heavy team. Tim Ray, the Red Springs coach, described it as very much an Eastern North Carolina football team that runs the ball 90+% of the time. They average less than 6 passing attempts per game on the season. The 2 stars in the running game, Jalen Willoughby, already over 1,000 yards with 23 touchdowns, and Jakari Lovely is nearing 1,000 yards, 954 for him, with 12 touchdowns on the season. A player to watch defensively will be Dontavius Johnson with 84 tackles and 10 for loss on the season. This is going to be a test for Red Springs. Obviously, always will be when you're playing a high seed, and one that, like the other 2 teams on this list for Robeson County, will come after a somewhat long bus ride. St. Paul's has the longest trip, but the other 2 are both around 2 hours or maybe a little bit more away as well. The winner of Red Springs and Southwest Edgecombe will face the winner of Southwest Onslow and Farmville Central when it comes time for the second round next week. And you can read about all of these games, preview story for these games on Robesonian.com, as well as a picks column, game stories from last week, from week 11 of the regular season. There's also state tournament soccer going on. Lumberton hosts Laney tonight over at the Kenneth W. Simmons soccer facility here in town, and that's a second round matchup. And then also the UNCP and Duke game story coming up here shortly on this Thursday morning about just the experience for the Braves and what it was like to play in Cameron Indoor Stadium. So for Paul Matthews behind the scenes, I'm Chris Stiles, sports editor at the Robesonian. Thanks to Lumberton head football coach Dennis McFatten for joining us. Thank you for joining us as well here on the Robesonian Sports Report on WAGR.